What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And today I wanted to make a video talking about 4 of my favorite defensive end prospects in this year's 2023 NFL draft. So I already made one of these videos about wide receivers, and if you want to go see that one, well, it'll most likely be linked at the end of this video. But today I wanted to do the same thing, but talking about defensive ends. So when I made my wide receiver video, I kind of made it to where it wasn't my top 4 favorite wide receiver prospects. It was just some guys that I liked that the Chiefs could draft in the early rounds, and then I threw some middle rounders in there. But in this one, I think I'm just going to tell you guys my top 4, like just my favorite edge prospects in this draft. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. And my number 1, my best case scenario at edge for the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is a guy that would most likely be a first rounder, that's going to be Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia. Nolan Smith is a very, very interesting prospect. And the reason why is because, well, first of all, he's not really a prototypical Spags defensive end. And you guys hear me say that a lot on this channel. I talk about a Spags defensive end, prototypical Spags defensive end. And most of you have a pretty good idea of what that looks like already. But for those of you that are like, what is a Spags defensive end? That is typically a guy that is, bigger, longer than most defensive ends. They're pretty stout players. So your guys that are like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and above, 260 to 280 pounds, big edge players that aren't super athletic, aren't super bendy, more so your bull rush type of players. And while Spags was able to succeed with that type of model, back in his days in New York and stuff like that, the game has changed a little bit, and you need to start adding some pass rushers that have that bend and had that elite athleticism, because the Chiefs don't really have that at defensive end, and they haven't really had that since Spags has been the defensive coordinator. So the question is, are the Chiefs willing to break from that mold to try and maximize what this pass rush can be? And they can do that if they were to draft Nolan Smith, the Georgia defensive end. So like I said, he's not a prototypical Spags defensive end. He's on the lighter side. He's 6'2", 235, 240 pounds. Like, he would be probably by far the smallest edge on the Chiefs roster. But again, the athleticism. The dude ran a 4.3 40-yard dash. Now, that's faster than a lot of wide receivers. And we're talking about a defensive end. And he has that, supreme bend that I'm looking for in the Chiefs' next edge player. He had a huge vertical jump too, huge broad jump. He's like in the 90th percentile on basically everything. It's just the size. The size is his downside. But that being said, I don't really care because he's just a great player. He plays the run super well for how small he is for a defensive end. And that's why, I'm willing to make that exception for him, is because he's just such a good player. And he plays the run really well, and that's a good way to get on the field as a rookie, is playing the run. And Nolan Smith does that. He's not afraid to come up and make a tackle or scrape down the line and make a tackle, make a stop. And I just really love that about his game when I watch his tape. Some people will tell you that he didn't produce at Georgia, and he didn't have elite numbers or anything like that. But people aren't counting the fact that Georgia loves to rotate their players a lot, especially on defense, and also because they just have so much NFL talent. And that's another thing, is Nolan Smith played behind a lot of future NFL guys on that defensive line at Georgia, especially his freshman and sophomore year. He didn't really get that same opportunity that he was getting as a junior and a senior. But I just love Nolan Smith and his pass rush upside, because again, people say he doesn't produce, but even this past season at Georgia, he had 3 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss, 18 total tackles, a pass defended. It's not like he did nothing. And in today's NFL, and in the draft more than ever, you're looking for traits more so than college production. Okay, prime example, Odafe Owe, or Jason Owe, whatever he calls himself now, who plays for the Baltimore Ravens. He was drafted like at the end of the first round by the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs traded their pick to the Ravens for that Orlando Brown deal, and the Ravens used that pick to get Odafe Owe. Odafe Owe did not have a single sack in college. Not a single sack. Ended up having 5 sacks as a rookie for the Baltimore Ravens. So you're looking for traits. And Odafe Owe was, similar profile to Nolan Smith. Just a freak athlete. Yeah, maybe didn't have the college production, but, teams saw that potential. And I see that potential in Nolan Smith. And I think he could be better than Odafe Owe. And that's the thing, is I don't know if he's going to be there at pick 31. This is probably a guy that you're going to have to trade up for. But he's one of my favorite prospects. But a prospect that I think realistically could be there in like the 20s and you could try and get him. It just really depends. There's your top 3 edges like Tyree Wilson, Willie Anderson, those guys. The Chiefs aren't getting those guys, and those guys aren't on my list. But Nolan Smith is one of the high-end pass rushers in this draft that you have a realistic chance of getting, in my opinion. He just brings that speed element, that bend around the edge that I want so badly and that this Chiefs defense doesn't currently have. I like where the Chiefs defensive end room is at right now with Karlaftis and Omenihu, but even those guys, they don't win the way Nolan Smith does. You need that fastball type of player that you can throw at offenses on third down. And that's Nolan Smith, because they had a little bit of that in Melvin Ingram when they traded for him. But even Melvin Ingram on this team in 2021 was their most athletic edge. And that we're talking about a 32-year-old guy that even Melvin Ingram wasn't the most athletic guy in the world, but he was your most athletic edge. And that just speaks to where the defensive end room was at. But if you bring in Nolan Smith, you're going to have a guy that really you just don't have on this roster, and a guy you haven't had in a long time, a guy with the ability that, Justin Houston had. But again, the question is, are the Chiefs willing to break off of their typical Steve Spagnuolo threshold that they have? And there is hope for that happening, because Joe Cullen, the defensive line coach, has name-dropped Nolan Smith a few times in some interviews. He was also the coach at Georgia's Pro Day running defensive line drills with Nolan Smith. And if there's anyone that could potentially have enough influence on Spags to get his guy on the defensive line, it's Joe Cullen. And he might be the guy that entices this team to bring in Nolan Smith. So we'll see. But that's my analysis on Nolan Smith. He's my favorite edge prospect in this draft for the Chiefs. And that's all I got on him. But yeah, he's my favorite. The second guy I'm going to talk about, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be a fan of this one, local Kansas State guy, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I'm just going to call him FAU from now on. But from Lee Summit High School, not far from the Chiefs Stadium at all. Local guy, and I think one that is on the Chiefs' radar. But the reason that I like him a lot, and I'm not sure, I don't think he's a bad pick at the end of the first round. I don't really have a first round grade on him, but I do think he's one of the safer prospects in this draft and one of the safer picks you can make at defensive end. Productive career at K-State. He had 8 sacks this past year as a junior at Kansas State. Also 8 QB hits and 27 QB hurries, 43 pressures. Some very good numbers for FAU. If you're looking for a guy that has exactly what I'm talking about, what I want in an edge rusher that still actually fits the Spags threshold, that is FAU. He's bigger than Nolan Smith. He has some power to his game, but he does have plenty of bend. He's actually surprisingly bendy for his size and for his build. He's a great tackler, very technically sound player, and he just plays very strong. Anudike-Uzomah, or FAU, gosh, I already abandoned it. He doesn't have elite size or an elite frame. He also doesn't have elite athleticism to go with it either, like Nolan Smith would. Or I guess I should say, he doesn't have elite athleticism like Nolan Smith does to make up for his lack of size. FAU is bigger than Nolan Smith, but he's not an elite athlete, and that's why you're going to see him, I think, as a second or third rounder. I'd say he's also a worse run defender than Nolan Smith. Not that he's bad against the run, he's just not as good, and sometimes it's more of a mental thing, just kind of not, understanding the assignment. but he does have a really good motor, and the effort is all there. Overall, I think FAU would just be a really safe, solid pick. Local guy too, so that's always a cool, positive thing. Not that it means they should draft him just because he's from K-State, but I do think he's a good player, and I think he's a fit for the Chiefs' defense. If he were brought onto this roster, he would immediately be your bendiest guy. That's ahead of George Karlaftis. That's ahead of Charles Omenihu. And just another good quality pass rusher to be adding this room. That would make you feel really good. If you had, Karlaftis, FAU, Omenihu, Mike Dana, that's a really good defensive end room to have. A lot of youth, too. All right, and the next prospect I'm here to talk about, this is going to be a pain to pronounce. Adetomiwa Adebawore from Northwestern. I think I got that right. Adebawore is also from Kansas City, or he went to North Kansas City High School. 3-star recruit coming out of high school. Ended up going to Northwestern. Almost went to a service academy school. He held offers from Air Force, Army, and Navy. I just thought that was interesting. But nonetheless, Adebawore, he's a very impressive prospect. So I didn't even pay a bunch of attention to this guy until after the Senior Bowl. I watched his Senior Bowl film, and my God, this guy is just ferocious. Very quick, very smooth first step, which allows him to win most of his reps. Again, also, like I said, just very aggressive, very ferocious. He's got quick, violent hands, and the guy's just going to give you everything that he has. As a senior at Northwestern, he recorded 31 pressures, 22 quarterback hurries, 3 quarterback hits, and 6 sacks. The interesting thing with Adebawore is that he's not super lengthy. His build is not super edge-like. He's 6'2", but he's 280 pounds. And he actually looks like a defensive tackle at first sight. He has versatility. He can play inside or outside. He can line up on the interior. He did rush from the interior plenty at Northwestern. He's an incredible athlete, but despite his athletic traits, he does not have great bend. He's not a super agile guy. He doesn't have very good pass rush moves, but the effort and just the way he plays, his bull rush, for one, is very good, especially on the interior, which, honestly, he reminds me a bit of Colin Saunders. But I do think he has a higher ceiling than Colin Saunders. Obviously, went up against better competition than Colin Saunders and produced at the college level. His testing numbers are just off the charts, as were Colin Saunders. But Colin Saunders was a player that needed a lot of refining. It's kind of the same with Adebawore, but there is a lot to work with here. I could definitely see a team taking Adebawore in the first round. I think his profile is probably first round worthy. I wouldn't take him the first round, though. I feel like that's a little rich. If he's there in the second round, absolutely. I don't know if he would last till pick 63, though. So, I don't know, man. It's interesting. I really like Adebawore, though. I think he has a ton of upside. He's right up there with Nolan Smith when it comes to upside, but I think Nolan Smith is a little more NFL ready than Adebawore is. So, look, if you can't get him, I would be satisfied with Adebawore. First round might be a little rich for me, but also, again, I don't know if you would get him at pick 63. But if you select him, I think you're going to take advantage of his ability to pass rush from the interior, line him up next to Chris Jones, and you could have a pass rushing set of Karlaftis, Adebawore, Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu, which would be deadly. But also, I maybe would want a guy that can contribute a little bit more at edge, because Adebawore, I think, might be best suited as just a 3-tech, that type of interior player. He's going to have some outside versatility still, though, just because he moves so well. But I just might want a guy that I know I can put at edge full time. And I don't know if I can do that with Adebawore, but he does have a versatile skill set that you would have to take advantage of if you were to select him. And we do know that the Chiefs have a need at interior. And if you draft Adebawore, I don't think, he totally fills your need at interior pass rusher, because he's on the shorter side, he can get overpowered by guards, some of the better guards in the NFL. if you were to put him there. So I don't know. Adebawore is interesting. He's a little bit of a tweener. But hey, elite athlete. I think he could be a good, productive NFL player. We'll see how the Chiefs feel about him, though, in this year's draft. All right, and last but not least in my list of 4 pass rushers that I would like the Kansas City Chiefs to look at in this year's 2023 NFL Draft, I'm going to go with LSU's B.J. Ojulari, a very quality, solid prospect in this draft. Ojulari is someone that I saw getting mocked to the Chiefs at 31 a lot before we really got into the pre-draft process. And now that projection seems a little rich for Ojulari. I think Ojulari is more of a second or third rounder, and that's fine. He might be gone before then, and I would understand if he was. But I don't think he's an elite prospect, but I think he has a chance to be a really good plus starter in the NFL. And the reason why is because he's a pretty fluid athlete, produced a lot at LSU as well, I should say. During the 2022 season, he had 50 total pressures, 28 quarterback hurries, 13 QB hits, and 9 sacks. He also went up against SEC competition all year long, which, hey, I think you got to put that on a different scale than some of these other prospects when you're doing that in the SEC against some of the best offensive linemen in the country. I know some people consider the Big Ten to be kind of the offensive line factory, but I think the SEC has kind of overtaken them in recent years. Now, I understand that Ojulari actually had a disappointing combine, and his relative athletic score is not great. He really underperformed in the 3-cone. His bench was okay. His broad jump was really the only area that he tested elite in. And then also his height and weight just isn't that big either. I mean, he's 6'2", 248. He's definitely not a huge defensive end, but I think he fits the Spags profile just enough for I think Spags would like him. We'll see how the Chiefs feel about him, but I really like Ojulari, and I think he's a better athlete than he tested because he's a very fluid mover on tape. And he's also got a really good pass rushing arsenal. He's a very polished pass rusher. He's also related to Azeez Ojulari of the New York Giants. And, I mean, you can tell that they're related when you look at some of his pass rushing moves. He also closes on tackles very well, which is nice to see because, he tackles the quarterback hard, man. Like, when you watch him, he's a pretty violent tackler, and I like that because nothing frustrates me more than defensive linemen missing tackles and losing out on sacks, letting plays live that should have died. B.J. Ojulari could end a lot of that. All that being said, Ojulari lacks some power. It would be nice to see him add some weight and some strength, especially to his lower half. He's not super strong in his base. I know that's not really his game, and if you're asking him to put on more weight, you could see him sacrifice some of his athletic ability that he already has, his speed. So maybe you just have to live with the way that he is, and if that's the case, oh well, fine. But like I said, he's a quality pass rushing prospect. I would like him on day 2 in the second or third round, maybe if the Chiefs decide to go wide receiver or tackle early instead of edge. But yeah, those are my thoughts on B.J. Ojulari. I think he'd be a solid get for this team. But that'll close out this video. Those are my top 4 favorite edge prospect fits with the Chiefs in this 2023 NFL draft. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of my picks? Could you see the Chiefs drafting any of these guys? And I want to hear from you. Who are some of your favorite edge prospects in this draft? Some guys you would like to see the Chiefs draft. I know I kind of kept it as my 4 favorite prospects, and I didn't go in depth on like guys that they could get in the later rounds. But if you guys have any late round gems that you like or that you want me to look into, hey, let me know in the comments. I'm all for it. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And I will see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!